Okay, it's here. What's here? Why am I talking? What's going on? So I have a 3D printer. It is a Creality CR-6se. I got it during Kickstarter, which is probably almost 5 years now. And it's been a great printer. Does everything I want it to do, but I've never updated it. Never messed with the factory firmware. I haven't replaced really any parts except for nozzles. So recently I started looking at a problem that the Crealities have, which is this one particularly. To get files into it, you either need to connect via USB cable to the computer, which sometimes doesn't work right, or you do it on an SD card. And the problem is you're flipping SD cards back and forth all day long, and what happens eventually is you have to reformat it and you lose all the files on it. So that started me on a adventure of taking a look at devices that are directly connected that can take the print file from the computer and take it right to the printer wirelessly. That led me down the path of the Creality Sonic Pad, which was a device that they made, almost 3 years ago now, I think, for this very fact. It actually controls the printer, and it does it in a very unique way. It actually takes over for the printer using a software called Clipper, and it micromanages the way the printer works, and it can actually make it faster while retaining quality, or actually make the quality better. So I went down that path, and I thought, well, maybe it's time to do something with the printer, and started looking at the Sonic pads. Well, brand new, they're about 120 bucks, which isn't a ton of money, but I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know if I'd be happy with it, because essentially this panel replaces the touch panel on your pad, on your printer, and you have to do a whole lot of work to get it to work, and things might go south. So I was considering just not doing it for a while, and then I saw that the Creality actually has these refurbished on eBay for a really good price, much less than the 120 or even half that price. I figured I'd take the gamble, so here it is. You can tell it's refurbished because it looks like a beaver chewed on the box, but the pad itself here, it still has the protective cover on it, is absolutely gorgeous, and no problems there. Even came with the little funny stickers from Creality. Came with well, every power adapter in the world. I'm obviously going to use the US one, and this was a little something I was worried about, that it's the G sensor that actually calibrates the vibration produced by the printer as it moves the head and the table around, so the Sonic Pad can actually account for that and not mess things up while it's speeding up, basically. But anyway, I got it, so I'm just going to do some small videos as I go through setting it up. There are plenty of great videos, one of which I'm going to be following, and I'll put them in the comments, how to do this. So I'm going to start it off, and if I run into any problems, I figure I can either just box it up, send it back, or take the loss, but I'm on an adventure. So join me as I attempt to put a Creality Sonic Pad on my old 3D printer. Okay, we're moving along quite well. We're at the point now where I get to select which printer I have to connect to it. Pleasantly surprised that CR-6se is in here. Actually, two different models. The one I have, which is the older version, and the one they actually shipped with after the Kickstarter. Just two different motherboards, and I was able to identify that by following the instructions and figuring them out. But it's good to go. It joined my network, did 2 upgrades, so I'm assuming I'm at the current version of the firmware for this, which is excellent. So we're moving along. Like I said, pleasantly surprised that the printer is there, which means I don't have to worry about any other config files or trying to jam in something that isn't part of the default. So we're going to keep going. see here, if I get that glare out of the way, the pad is connected to Phil, and it is doing calibration tests. Couple of things that I might want to throw out there for anybody that's doing this is when you plug in your SD card, it's going to, actually what happens first is the speed pad will ask you to plug the SD card into it. It's going to send a new firmware to the file, to the SD card, and then it's going to ask you to plug that into your printer and turn it on. And then it says click next. Well, I was kind of like, well, next where? What's going to, because at the time when you do that, the speed pad is not connected to the printer, and when the printer comes up with this new firmware file, it just shows this, never boots. I was like, oh God, did I brick my printer, or what's going on? And then I kind of realized the next button is over here on the actual speed pad. So what you're actually doing is following its instructions, sticking the SD card into the pad. Pad's going to put a little file in it. You're going to stick that back in the printer, turn it on, and the printer's going to come up stupid. And you're going to not freak out, and you're going to push next over here on the speed pad, and then it's going to tell you to connect it to the printer with a USB cable, and then everything should start working, and then you'll go through the auto calibration. So a little goofiness on my part. I mean, it is just a little, when they say next, press next, they should say press next on the speed pad or tell you where, but it looks like I've got a really kind of cool calibration going here. The auto level has a lot more steps than before. You can kind of tell it's figuring out what's level and what's not on my print bed. Don't worry, they're all kind of goofy like that. That's why you do a calibration, and then the printer automatically adjusts. So we're moving on.
Okay, we're back again. Another day of fun with the printer. As you can tell, just turned it on. Everybody's happy. One thing that I did after I got everything calibrated is I tried a test print. And for the test print, I printed this little accessory here. This is a mount for the G sensor, and that is going to be used later for some more advanced calibration. The G sensor comes with the Sonic Pad, and it's used to make measurements of basically the G load that moving your printer's head and bed around causes for the entire assembly. This will come in really handy as we try to accelerate the printing and keep the same quality. So I did print that. One thing that was interesting was the files that actually come with the printer, but they're STLs, so I had to convert them with a slicer to G code and then move them back, and that's where I kind of ran into a problem because the SD card on mine is still flaky. After about 2 or 3 times the files get corrupted and I have to format it. So what I've done is I'm dumb, is I realized that the Sonic Pad actually has a web page that you can immediately use once the pad is up and connected to your network, and you can use this to move the files to your printer without having to use an SD card. So that's where we are right now, and we've printed out the G sensor. We've mounted it. I mean, the G sensor mount, which is actually this part here. The G sensor is this little black box here. I'm gonna test it here, and then I'll probably just tape it to the hotbed and let it do its calibration, and then after that, we're going to try to speed up the printing. I'm just following a guide that's on the YouTube that I'll post, and let's try the next thing. Alright. The trials and tribulations of testing. So we're printing
another test cube for what's called pressure advance. We were able to get the other settings good. I got my retraction down, and I got my G-force resonance testing done without any problem. Now at the point I'm printing a cube that is supposed to tell me at what point I'm getting the best pressure through my nozzle. I did a test print without messing with anything, and I got this, and nice smooth size, seems to be good, but that's not the point. You're trying to get one that eventually fails. Well, unfortunately, first one failed right off the bat. Again, not sure. I'm trying again. I think the issue is that I am using an Orca slicer, which is one of the newer slicing programs, and the gentleman I'm following on YouTube is actually using an old slicer, Cura, I believe, maybe even that old. So I'm kind of running into some kind of conflict, but we shall get it. Okay, and we're printing again. I'm beginning to think my problem here is kind of a difference between Cura and Orca Slicer and possibly Prusa. The examples that I was given on how to set up this calibration test were actually using Cura, which is a slicer that I used quite a while ago. I didn't like it because the print times were way out of estimation and things were just taking forever to print. So I updated to Prusa Slicer, which is made by the Prusa company, and it was good, and then it had some problems. Well, then I upgraded to Orca, which is a fast slicer, and it does a good job, but kind of got bit in the butt because the examples I've been following are actually for Cura. And so I upgraded my version of Cura, and I was actually, interestingly enough, I was using a 3-year-old video, and the version that he was using was actually a newer version than the one I still had on my computer. So that kind of tells you I haven't been updated. So I updated Cura. It's familiar to me. I resliced it, and we're going to try again because what's been happening, this print here, you can see it looks like hell. The ideal is it's supposed to be smooth at the bottom, and then as it gets up at the top, it's supposed to get more raggedy, and you're using that transition point to figure out what's the best extrusion pressure so that you can ramp up the speed. Well, the problem is mine is never smooth. It's garbage. There's layer separation all the way through, and I'm thinking it's because I'm slicing it with the wrong program. Because what the program is doing in the clipper is actually starting with one extrusion pressure and then changing it as it goes up. And well, the problem is there's no point where it is good. Now right here you can kind of see there is a transition point where it just turned from garbage to a hot mess, but that's not good enough for me to measure and figure out. So we're trying the Cura version now, and this is really the last test that I need to get accomplished before I move on to ramping up the speeds and really getting to the fun part of it. Right now it's just been really a lot of calibration. But the good news is, I mean, I'm able to do this remotely. I'm able to do this through the pad. Things have not been terrible. They've just been a little frustrating, and that is because the examples I've been using were for a different software than I've actually been using. So I kind of broke down and finally got with the program. Let's see what we do. Well, looky there. I finally got calibration test going. Hopefully what I will see as this thing works is it will slowly degrade as it gets higher. that wall won't be as smooth, and I'll be able to use that distance from the bottom to where it degrades to set a calibration point, and then I can work on cranking up speed. It's taken a while to get to this. I think a lot of it is because I was following an old example using the wrong slicer, and also the guy was changing way too many parameters where really you just need to change the height of the walls and the speed and let the slicer do the rest, and then set it to go. I think I was trying to do too many things with the wrong slicer. So, more progress. Of course, it's taken me quite a few prints and an hour a piece to do it, but that's the beauty of 3D printing calibration. So far, SpeedPad's really done a great job. I mean, it's allowed me to transfer the files right over from my computer without having to use the SD card. It's allowed me to stop things and calibrate my printer and do all sorts of things remotely, and no, knock on wood, no errors, no problems. The only problems I've had were self-inflicted. So we're going to let this guy run. He's at 23%, another 47 minutes remaining, and we should potentially see this here wall start to degrade slightly as it gets higher and set a point. Happy times. Okay, it's time for some thoughts and observations. Been working with this little guy for 3 days now, and I think we've come to an understanding. It is a great device for controlling, monitoring, and potentially speeding up your printer. It's been a journey. I want to start with a couple of quantitative things. First, these are test prints that I did before I put the speed pad on. I just wanted to get a baseline, and each one of these took about an hour, 50 minutes, more or less. And you can see they're stringing. I think a lot of that is due to the filament I was using. But you're basically testing how fast your printer can go without making a mess. And this was the final one that I printed in a filament that I was going to be using as a reference. And it had stringing too. I just removed it. You can hit it with a flame, and then that stringing just basically disintegrates. But it kind of shows to me that my printer was really not configured correctly. And one of the things I noticed during the testing of all of this was it was putting too much filament out. And when that happens, it's always dribbling filament, and instead of being able to retract that filament and move cleanly from point to point, what happens is the filament will essentially just get dragged like the cheese on a spaghetti, cheese on a pizza, and it's going to cause this effect. And that was one of the things I fixed with the SpeedPad, because it's one of the things you can easily fix when you're using an external controller as opposed to trying to do it inside the printer itself. So that was a benefit. My final tests, these were done finished about 40 minutes, or I think one of them was almost 35. So you're getting a pretty good reduction in speed. When you're talking from 50 minutes to 30 minutes, or an hour to 30 minutes, that's not bad. But when you're talking about some of these prints that could take 12 hours and you get that down to 6 or maybe 7, that's really good. And that's where this thing will shine in some of these really large, complicated prints where I would basically have to run this thing all day. I would only have to run it for 5 or 6 hours to make something substantial. That being said, I thought it would be as easy as connecting this guy and hitting the speed button. When you start printing, there'll be a button here under control usually, and it'll say speed, and you can bump up the speed to whatever you want. It starts at 100%. You can go to 150, 200. Although that would be as simple as that. It isn't really, because what you're doing with this device and all this calibration work is you're figuring out how fast your printer can go without sacrificing quality. So once you get that calibration done, then you can start making that modification with the files that you send over. So it's not so much this guy, he doesn't have a turbo button, or even the speed button. I find it just kind of ignores you. What it does is it actually gives you the ability to ramp up the settings. So these guys printed at about the same time, but they had vastly different settings. One of them was set to print draft mode, and one of them was set to print regular quality mode, and they look pretty close to each other. I mean, yeah, there are some slight differences, but when you consider the time difference between the two of them, it's pretty good. I think this one was a 50-minute print, and this one was down at about 35 to 40. So you're getting a pretty good time savings and keeping the quality, and that ultimately is the goal of this device, is to print fast, print accurate, and not lose that quality, and also be able to monitor your prints so that if something does go bad, you can stop the print and do other things. So I'm going to do some more research. I'm not done yet, but I've had some really good results. I'll put the links below. Some of the great people I found on the internet that have actually done really good tutorials on this. More work to come for me, but right now I'm really happy with what I figured out, and also very happy that I've tuned my printer. I did have one interesting item. I started it yesterday, and it immediately told me there was a sensor error, and I was going to blame the speed pad and say, oh God, what has happened now? This is one of the sensors. It basically tells the printer where the print head is in space as it moves around, and Creality in their wisdom connect all of the sensors in one place on the back of the printer, and then all of the sensors are connected to the motherboard with this big cable. Well, because this is all really close to where the spool is and where I've been working to load and unload filament, because this is where the filament loads, I had bumped this cable accidentally, and I bumped it hard enough to rock it, and that had disconnected some of my sensors, and that was giving this weird error. But fortunately, because this guy is very good at controlling this printer, he was able to tell me which sensors and what was going on, and I was able to reseat the cable, reinitialize the sensors, and get it working. So, and this was one of the ones that was giving me an issue, was this micro switch that was telling me it was not connected when it actually was. So, yay for the speed pad. Thanks for giving me a heart attack, but you actually helped me fix the problem that I had caused. And we're going to do some more fun stuff, and I'm going back to regular printing, and hopefully be able to print some really big things without having to turn it into an all-day affair. So if you like this video, please give it a like. And also please check out the links of the other people who really helped me on my journey with this speed pad. Couldn't done it without them. Alright, thank you. I swear this is my last video. Maybe. Okay, these are the calibration cats that come at the tail end of about 5 days worth of effort in working with the Creality Sonic Pad. It's a success, actually, because each of these are dimensionally perfect. They came out without any problems, and they also printed in half the time that normally I was printing these. So that is a win. Now, in order to get there, it's been a journey. Let's put it that way. If you get the Sonic Pad and to calibrate it, if you're following people on the web or even Creality's suggestions, you're going to start with Cura. I used to use Ultimaker Cura for a while, but I found it to be kind of lacking. But in this case, in order to calibrate this Sonic Pad, get things working correctly, you are going to need the use of this slicer, and then come back to it to use the profiles that Creality used. Like I said, I've used it before, and while it's not terrible, I eventually moved away from it, and I moved to Prusa Slicer, which, even though it's made by a company that does make 3D printers, it's more open source and more community funded and upgraded so that you can use it with just about any printer. And I've used it successfully for over a year, but then I started having some issues with reliability of it, and I wanted something that was faster. And then I heard about Orca Slicer. Orca Slicer is essentially based on the same bones of Prusa Slicer. They all came from a program called Slicer, but its logic is a little faster, a little cleaner, and it can print a wee bit faster. Now, I've used it, I've become quite familiar with it, and then in my journey to run the speed pad, I had to go back to Cura for a while, and then I was thinking, well, now I can take those settings and go to Orca. So I was going to download the Cura slicers information and profiles from the Creality website, and when I went to the Creality website, where right there it says Sonic Pad, I found this, Creality Print. What is this? Creality has created their own slicer. Well, that's nice, except for a couple things. One, do I really need another slicer? And two, where is all the profiles and settings and stuff for the Sonic Pad? Right? It says Sonic Pad. It's Creality Print. This is two different things. So I reluctantly downloaded Creality Slicer. And to my general amusement and happiness, it is actually based on Orca. So you're really not taking a step backward if you do Creality. And what I was able to find was there are Sonic Pad drivers. Now, unfortunately, the Sonic Pad drivers are only for the Ender 3 series, but if you work with it, you can modify them to work with your printer. So essentially, it's been a journey, and I came full circle. I'm kind of back to Orca through this slicer, and by using it, I've been able to print these test prints at twice the speed, half the time, and they came out perfect. So I'm hoping one day Creality actually continues their Sonic Pad support and will come out with settings for all their printers. Right now, like I said, it's just the two Enders and you have to kind of modify them. But for now, I'm happy. I'm actually using something that is based on Orca. You can see kind of funny side by side. The settings screen on Orca is on the left, Creality Pad on the right. There's a few little things, but I understand that the bones are the same, so I'm kind of willing to work with it for now. Hope you all have enjoyed this crazy series. I'm going to put it up on the web. Look forward to your comments. Any people out there that are using Creality Print or in the same situation that I am with Sonic Pad and an old CR-6se, post some info. I'd like to get together and compare notes.